Good morning. Good morning. This is Tanny Reed Walker, and today is June 29th, 2020. This is Monday Morning with Tanny. I am a counselor with FCSS in the Barons Rica Warner area. I work primarily out of Tabor and the MD of Tabor. However, because of online counseling and groups, we are able to reach a larger distance. So that's a wonderful thing. Here in southern Alberta this morning, it is rainy. It's been rainy for a few days, and it looks like it's going to be rainy for a few more. And I am inside because of that. So hopefully next week I'll be able to be outside again. If you're watching, please comment that you are watching now. I look forward to interacting with people. Thanks, Charisma, for the wave. Anybody else that's on right now, please let me know. Feel free to share, and whether you're sharing now that you're watching this or anybody that you feel would benefit from having some support around their grief and mourning. Last week I talked about, just briefly, the 6 needs of reconciliation, according to Dr. Alan Wolfelt. And as promised, today we will be talking about the first 2. I listed them. They are acknowledging the reality of the death and moving towards the pain of the loss. So the first one, this Dr. Alan Wolfelt says is the linchpin, the beginning of the trail of grief. This doesn't just happen in a moment, it can take weeks and years. However, if this one isn't being looked at and being addressed and being experienced, the other ones cannot happen very well. So this one's very important. When I talk about acknowledging the reality of the death, it means taking the time to understand that that person isn't physically here anymore, to look at how your emotional relationship has changed with that person, looking at how they died, acknowledging the causes and the circumstances of their death. And in some situations, this can be very difficult. You may not have seen them die. You may not, it may have been sudden. It could have been a suicide. It could have been a homicide. It could have been somebody who was far away and you just weren't able to see them. It can be a sudden death that nobody was expecting. It can even be a death from an illness, and it's so common and understandable to ask why, and to think, well, what if this person had done this, or this person had died? What if I had done that? What if that one time we had an argument? What if, what if, what if? And it's absolutely necessary to be able to go through and ask those questions. What if? You need or should try to find somebody who is safe, who you can talk about your story to. Talk about your story of the life and the death. Talk through your challenges about the reality of this death. Because it's very hard on our brains. Sometimes, and for some people it's harder on their hearts, because both your brain and your heart have to acknowledge this and understand in some way that this has happened and come to an acceptance of it. And that can be very difficult, and it's going to take some time. Allow yourself the exploration of the cause or circumstance. Sometimes, if it's very complicated and you're not sure what happened, give yourself permission to look into it. Get an autopsy, explore what happened, talk to the people who were involved or around the person that passed away. Take the time to do that if that's going to help you come to your own conclusion about what happened. Another thing that can happen that can prevent acknowledging the reality of the death can be family systems. Some families just don't talk about it. Some families refuse to acknowledge that person even existed after they died. Some cultures do. And if that's your culture, that's you're going to probably want to look for somebody who understands how to work through death and mourning from that perspective. Other cultures, you may just find it's just been kind of passed down in your family, and you are not the kind of person that can deal with that way. So take some time. You can find counselors, you can find other people. Does anybody have that kind of culture in their family or any of their systems where they just don't deal with it, or they numb it out using substances or behavioral addictions or anything like that to try to basically numb the pain and pretend nothing's happening, nothing is going on. Their world didn't get turned upside down. Thank you, Charisma. She spoke that she had to speak with police officers and look through her dad's house before she could start to acknowledge the reality of the death. And if you need to do those things, it's very, very good to do them. If it's niggling at the back of your mind and you think, well, if I just knew this or if I just knew that, go down the path of figuring out what happened so that it works for you. Because otherwise, you could just end up with some magical thinking, well, maybe they'll just show up, or or maybe it was a disappearance trick. We've seen lots of movies where people fake their deaths, and we can always hope, but that doesn't help with your healing and your creation of your new life without that person in them. Another thing that can complicate the acknowledging the reality of the death is, I've spoken of this before, and that is carried grief. So if you have grief from the past that you have not acknowledged, excuse me, you haven't worked through, you haven't integrated into your life, you just kind of pushed it back. Dr. Alan Wolfelt says it's like those Russian dolls, where you have the little tiny doll and then outside it's another doll and it's just like bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And sometimes you just have to go all the way down through the layers to get to that first one, or start at the first one and then build that doll up to where you are today. It's a layer thing. And if you're compounding that grief, it can really affect people. It can cause lots of anxiety, it can cause physical problems, it can cause so many things that are happening. So I had also spoken in another video, the paradoxes of mourning, about going backwards instead of forwards, and that's the same idea. You go backwards to those early griefs and work your way forwards. Again, I also spoke about it being, that sounds very lineal. It's not always going to be lineal. Another thing that can complicate the acknowledging the reality of death is lack of funerals, or unable to attend funerals or other ceremonies. I think that during this COVID-19 situation of the world pandemic, that is a very, very, very large reality for people and how they're experiencing their lives right now. Oh wait, I see a question from Prisma. Does it have to be grief from death? or grief from trauma too? Well, that is a good question, Prisma, actually, because if there is trauma that is involved with the death, it's extremely good idea to deal with that trauma. It's very hard to mourn unless you have worked with the trauma that has occurred. That was a really, really great question. Thank you. And some of these more complicated deaths, there is trauma that's happening. Death is traumatic just to begin with, but if it's complicated with suicide or homicide or a terrible accident, there's all kinds of things. War, I would imagine, shootings, all kinds of things would cause um, definitely some of that stuff that you're probably asking about. Does that answer your question? I'll wait a few minutes, or I'll respond after if you message me again. Okay, so back to the funeral. So if you are in a situation where you're not able to go to the funeral, you're not able to do a viewing, you're just not able to have your normal, thanks Prisma, support system around you, then creating your own ceremony is very valid. I know people who have set up um, like ceremonial spaces in their homes, or I've mentioned before, I've heard about some backyard candlelight vigils. Um, you can, there's, oh, an infinite amount. If anybody who's watching knows of any ceremonies that they've heard of, I would really appreciate that. Or anybody that might possibly watch this after. Please add to the comments. I think that's awesome. Another thing you can do to acknowledge the reality of death is visit the place of death. So Prisma spoke of going through her dad's house. That happens very frequently. I remember when my husband's father died, we were at his house and he was a smoker. And I went out to the front step. He had left the house perfectly clean when he called the ambulance to go to the hospital. And on the front step, there was a little can, a little tuna can with some cigarette butts in it, and there was a half smoked cigarette. And I knew that was the last thing he did before he left the house while he was waiting for the ambulance. And that was really impactful for me. It's like that was his life lived and something that he enjoyed. I'm not saying smoking's healthy, obviously, but it was really impactful for me to realize that his life was like cut short, just like half a cigarette. So visiting the place can be really powerful. One thing I've noticed a lot is car accidents. I see crosses and flowers and teddy bears and pictures of places where people have been in an accident and died. And every time I see that, I think about the people that were impacted by that. I don't know who they are, but I like to think that my feelings of empathy are felt by them. And I know that there were people there that gathered and a life was lost in that spot. And that's really powerful. And I also think it's really amazing for acknowledging that passing on. So, yeah, I really suggest working on acknowledging that reality of death. And like Dr. Ellen Wolfeld said, it is very important for dealing, working through, and experiencing the other needs. So let's move on to the second need today because we're doing two of the needs over the next couple of weeks. So today we're also going to talk about embracing the pain of the loss. So you can see how it would be very important to acknowledge the reality of the loss to be able to embrace and experience the pain. Because if you're busy avoiding and numbing and trying to pretend all of this isn't happening and isn't real, you're not going to have that experience of the pain. Our culture has a massive fix it mentality. Accept it, move on, like take a pill, take a sleeping pill, take an antidepressant, um, have a drink, go partying, go shopping, go out and find a new relationship, go find yourself, go to school. Oh my goodness, there's so many things that the culture that I live in has decided are ways to fix grief and not feel the pain. Well, it's actually very healthy to embrace that pain and realize that you're a human and what has happened is painful. So, what are the 5 areas you're going to experience pain in? They are physical, cognitive, emotional, social, and spiritual. I'll say that again. You're going to feel it in 5 ways: physically, cognitively, so that means in your brain, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. And how will this manifest? And if any of you have had experience with that and wish to talk about it here, that would be super powerful. It looks like we only have 1 viewer at this moment, but hopefully more will join, and I thank you for watching. Okay, physical. So this is when your body responds to the stress of the pain. Lots of people feel it in different ways. Headaches, eye aches, lots of digestive symptoms. Our digestive system actually creates the most serotonin. So it would make which is a happy hormone. So it would make a lot of sense that there would be digestive upset during this time, which would make us feel quite down. Body aches, not being able to sleep. I can't even express all of the things that people probably feel. I feel tensed up in my shoulders when I talk about it. So I suspect that's something that can happen. There's a lot of things that can occur with embracing the pain. The body feels emotional pain or experiences emotional pain in the brain is the same as physical pain. So it's super real. Cognitive. So this is thought processes are confused and memories can be impacted. So thank you, Charisma, for typing that out. So if you're feeling like you can't get timelines right, or you can't remember, like sometimes people panic because they can't suddenly remember how their loved ones sounded or smelled or looked like for a bit. That's all normal. Take a deep breath and realize you're normal. You're not going to think clearly. Your communication can be really off. I know that there is so much paperwork and so many things that have to get done when someone dies. And it's really terrible that we have to deal with this because our thought processes are not working clearly. So I really hope that you have a good support in that aspect of people who can kind of help take over, help guide you, and comfort you, and help you with those thought processes. So emotional, well, you've been feeling the emotions. They come like waves, and they can be all of the emotions. They don't just have to be sad. And not obviously they can be sad, but there's not just sad. There's all the emotions happen when someone dies. And they demand comfort and care. They don't demand beating up or I should be feeling better or I should get over this. None of that stuff. What they demand is comfort and care. So take care of yourself. If you need to curl up in your bed, cuddling a pillow with the blankets over you, do that. If you need to just sit in the quiet in a park, do that. Do the things that help you experience that pain and make you feel comfortable. person says, I decided to go to work after my dad's death and it was embarrassing how many mistakes I made. Yeah. And the fact that you're saying that it's embarrassing just shows how our society is. So hopefully this will help and we can help change how people perceive individuals who are experiencing grief and mourning. Because it's completely natural to not be able to think properly. Your whole world just got disrupted. Your brain is basically frantically working on rewiring everything. Oh, so much work. Be kind to yourself. Social. This one comes up a lot in my grief groups when I run them in person. Um, Lots of times people withdraw when they are experiencing grief and they are mourning. The feelings and experiences and the pain and everything is really overwhelming. And then it's also hard because you're not sure which people are going to be helpful. I've spoken before about the one third, one third, one third. One third of people are going to be like hurtful when you're around them, one third are going to be neutral, and one third are going to be helpful. And you don't know who's going to be who. I've heard so many times, I thought that person was going to be so supportive and they weren't. And that hurts so bad. So it compounds it. And that social pain is very difficult. And if the grief and if the death was a complicated one, then lots of times friends and family don't know what to do and they're mostly paralyzed themselves and not knowing how to support, so they withdraw too. They don't want to invade, they don't want to step on your toes, they don't want to make you sad, they don't want to make you cry, they don't want to remind you of the death like you could forget. They don't want to invade on your privacy, all of these things. So that social change, that can be painful, very painful. And spiritual. So lots of people you can expect to go through wondering, why go on? What's my purpose here? Will life ever have meaning again? Why should I bother taking care of myself? We're all just gonna die anyway. Like so many things. Where's God? Why didn't God change this? I prayed hard. There's so many things that can impact us spiritually. And if you have a spiritual leader, I recommend talking to that person. I recommend exploring your own spirituality and having open conversations with somebody that you trust about that. All of these pains are definitely common, they're normal in a really abnormal feeling situation. And it's really important to embrace them and go through them. I wish it was different and I had a magic wand, but we're human. And the person that you love is they're going to take some of this time and you're going to experience some pain. Sometimes people are afraid to experience pain and want to numb it out or do things so that they are avoiding it massively because they're afraid of breaking down. And they're afraid of breaking down and not coming back. And that is not what happens. So if you're afraid of breaking down and not coming back, find a safe space. And it would be really nice if you had a safe person that you can do this with. But if you can't, you can find a safe space. Strong feelings are normal. You've had strong feelings many times. And you've come through them. Whether they're strong feelings of joy, strong feelings of love, strong feelings of peace, strong feelings of sadness, strong feelings of anger, human beings are capable and designed to deal with our strong feelings. You will survive them. You will thrive for them. And not only that, it's an emotional release. It is how we can help ourselves get through the pain of the loss. Take the time to have the feelings. Relax into it. You don't need to always control it. So, I'm not saying to be living in deep, intense pain all the time. You can dose it. You can find times and spaces where you rest in that pain. You can have a journaling time, you can have prayer time, you can have time set aside with a counselor, you can have time set aside with friends, you can have ceremonial times. There's lots of ways to deal with dosing the pain. We aren't designed to feel pain all the time. However, we are designed to feel pain and we need to experience it. I just want to address one final thing about feeling the pain. Sometimes people hold on to their pain because they feel like it's the only way to stay connected with their loved one. Or they feel like if they've felt the pain and they don't continue to feel that pain, that they're not honoring the life of their loved one. Or that the person that may have killed them or the reason why they died isn't valid or was like let off the hook. And that's not the case. You can create new connections with your loved one that has passed on. You have so many memories that you can stay connected with your loved one that don't involve all that pain. Releasing the pain is a very, very good thing. If you hold on to the pain of that loved one that's passed on, you risk dying yourself while you're still alive. You're here to live. And even though living without that person can be painful, you will find a way to do this. You do not need to continue holding on to that pain to stay connected. You are important and you are living. And as difficult as that is right now, it's how our world, how our life is. And your loved one is not going to want you to hold on to that pain. So embrace the pain when it comes. Say, okay, I understand what's going on with myself. Which area is this pain coming from? Is it cognitive? Is it physical? Is it social? Is it spiritual? And this is normal. So that is the two first needs, reconciliation needs for mourning. That was acknowledging the reality of the death and moving towards the pain of the loss. I will do two more next Monday. And thank you very much for watching the video. If you know of anyone that would like to, or you think would benefit from it, please let them know. This will also be on YouTube, so people can subscribe and like. And for this next week, I really hope that you're kind to yourself. And if you have any suggestions, please let me know. If you want to share how you've acknowledged the reality of the death of your loved one or how you've embraced the pain, I welcome those things as well. So take care, and I will see you in a week.